Welcome to Father and Son, and welcome to you on this very cold morning, Tom.
Morning, Dad. Yes, we had 100-kilometre-an-hour winds in Melbourne last night, quite something, and airlines are being delayed everywhere again. So the wind, the volcanic ash clouds, people can't fly back and forth to Adelaide, Hobart or Canberra this morning.
And Sydney is closing at 3 o'clock.
So difficult times.
It is difficult, but the main news of the morning, of course, is the takeover Foster.
Yeah, well, you can see the Foster symbol between the two of us on the shelf there. Sadly, I think within a month or so that will cease to be an Australian-owned company. Now, this morning, as I've reported on my market report, SAB Miller, which is the combination of the old South African breweries, and Miller, which is the American company, have bid $4.90 a share. It's been rejected by the board. At least two other groups, I think, could enter the fray for this. But it almost certainly means that Foster's will be taken over.
Well, it's a very sad day for me. We spent a lot of time, I did when I took over Foster's in '83, and we Fosterised the world. We made the fourth biggest brewer in the world. We kept out of the wine business because of the ease of entry into it. Foster's cost themselves $5 billion, you said on this show a week or so ago.
Wine has been an absolute debacle for the company.
They sold off all the brewing assets. We'd taken over Courage in the UK, Carling O'Keefe, merged that into Molson's. They sold it all off. I blame Ted Kunkel for this, first of all, and then they had accountants running the place who didn't know what they were doing. And the result is that Foster's now is just an Australian brewer. And I think the opening gamut is only 8% up on the last night's share price. So, there's several other people that come into it, couldn't they?
Yeah, look, Asahi is an obvious one, and a group of Molson, or I should say a consortium of Molson and Grupo Modelo, which is a Mexican brewer that brews Corona. And of course, Foster distributes Corona in Australia. Look, the bigger issue is, I guess, irrespective of whether it's SAB Miller or Asahi or Molson who ends up buying Foster's, is 2 years ago, the Foreign Investment Review Board allowed Lion Nathan to be taken over by Kirin, another Japanese brewer. Now, obviously, if they've allowed one to be taken over, they probably have to allow the other to be taken over.
I see no reason why they shouldn't.
What shouldn't allow it?
No.
No, but I mean, do you think it's a sad thing for Australia when we do allow these national assets, these cultural icons as well, to be foreign owned, or do you think it's just the way of the world?
I think it's the way of the world, and I think it comes down to extraordinarily bad management and a terrible board at Foster's that have put them into this situation. Well, we had that company in great shape. Every other brewer in the world was scared of us, including Anheuser.
Well, but in economics and in companies, we know. I mean, if a company is badly run, but can be fundamentally made good, if the company's own management and board don't do it, someone else always does.
Yeah, and that's what's happening here.
Yeah, it is.
And I think the wine business will go too, but because they don't know how to run that. The only problem is what they'll get for that is anybody's guess.
Yeah, wine is more difficult than beer. Yeah, I agree. Look, it's a sad day. It's good for shareholders. I mean, shareholders will get the rewards they deserve after years and years and years of terrible share price performance.
Exactly. Right, let's get on to the Liberal Party. Tony Abbot's announced he wants to put a plebiscite into the community. That is a vote which would take place in November. It's got to go through the Senate to get up, and it's going to cost about $80 million, and this is on the carbon tax. Now, as I understand, it's been knocked on the head because one of the two independent senators have decided not to support it.
Yeah, I heard that Andrew Wilkie might support it, but you need either Rob Oakeshott or Tony Windsor to do it as well.
Look, they're lower house people.
No, sorry, you're saying in the Senate.
Yeah. So that's where they're putting the bill into the House.
Sorry, you're quite right.
And Fielding has said he won't support it, whereas the other guy will.
Yeah, look, it's a funny one, this one. I mean, governments are there to govern, and you can't have plebiscites on every issue, although, in some societies, I mean, in some parts of Switzerland, they all meet in the town square and vote on things. In ancient Greece, they used to do that too. But the reason we put governments in is to make decisions for us. Now, one thing Tony Abbott needs to be careful of, let's just say he's successful in getting a plebiscite on this issue, and then subsequently he ends up being Prime Minister at some stage down the track. Surely his opponents can come back to him and say every time there's a contentious piece of legislation, well, let's have a plebiscite. You did it. Why shouldn't we do it?
No, but this is a bit different because...
Well, why is it different?
Well, because Gillard went to the polls saying there will be no carbon tax, and because of minority government, she's been pushed by the Greens to put it in. And therefore, she hasn't really got a legitimate reason for doing it, having categorically said before the last election that she wouldn't put it in.
Okay, but I mean,
Now, I just want to finish on this. Howard, on the other hand, told everybody that if he wins this election, the election way back when, he was going to put a GST in. He gave the people the opportunity. That's why it's a very odd occurrence, but I think the plebiscite would be a good thing.
But Abbott has shot himself in the foot because he's already said, if he, let's say the plebiscite was to support a carbon tax, it seems unlikely, but let's just say it goes ahead and that's how people vote, to support a carbon tax, Abbott has said he'll overturn it. So what's the point of having a plebiscite and arguing for one?
Well, the reason he's doing this is just to keep the publicity on the carbon tax on the front page, because it's a winner for him. You can see the polls. One of the major reasons that the polls are going against Gillard and her popularity's down is because people hate, people who make pledges before an election and they change their mind totally.
Of course. But
so it's all politics and it's not going to go ahead anyway.
All right, well, it probably won't go ahead. In fact, the last time we had a real plebiscite was 1977. I was in grade 4 at school, and it was changing the national anthem from what it was then, God Save the Queen. I remember we had choices of Waltzing Matilda, we could have kept God Save the Queen. Obviously, Advance Australia Fair got up, probably not the best choice, some would say. There was a few other funny songs around then too, I can't remember, but in our class we wanted Waltzing Matilda, but we got Advance Australia Fair.
Well, when we still, at the Warramah Sports and Recreation Club, we have our annual meeting. When the Moolameen Cup's on, we still stand up and sing God Save the Queen.
God Save the Queen. Now, what about Peter Reith? I was at a Liberal Party breakfast a week ago. I spoke at it with a panel with him. He spoke as well, and he was campaigning very heavily to the party faithful. He wants for Alan Stockdale to not be re-elected president, for him to be appointed.
Is the reason that you've come out at the breakfast, what the reason is for Reith being so against Stockdale?
He did talk about it. He said he didn't want to mention Alan Stockdale as such. What he really wanted to say was, he did the review into what happened at the last election, which you'd have to say the party did very well, but why didn't they win? He's done the review, and he said, curiously the same as what John Faulkner and the Labor Party has said, that the party needs to get back closer to its grassroots. There used to be the Policy Advisory Committee where branch members had some say in Liberal Party policy. That apparently got shut down a few years ago. The Labor Party, of course, is completely divorced from its own members. And
much more than the Liberal.
Much more, and is run by the union movement now and by the Greens. But anyway, Peter Reith has identified this as a weakness or a potential source of strength for the Liberal Party, and he's saying, as president, that's what he will do. He'll also have a harder line on boat people and that sort of thing. He sounded like the Peter Reith of old as a politician, but I guess it needs to be remembered that the president of the party is more about administration and fundraising than directly getting involved in policy.
Well, no, that's correct. The Federal Council can discuss policy matters. However, it does put you in a great position of influence. I can remember when I was federal president, 3 people ran the campaign at a national election. The federal president, the federal treasurer, and the prime minister or leader of your party. Now, those 3 people, because in the end it was the president and the treasurer who determined how much money would be spent on that.
Yeah, so it is powerful.
And you also therefore influence and do a lot of the research which helps the politicians determine what the issues are. So it is a powerful position. It's very unusual for somebody to stand against an incumbent. I cannot recall it in the history of the Liberal Party.
No, look, again, the way he was talking, it really was like, this is a political battle and I want to win it. And that's what the Peter Reith of old was like. Of course, he was a bit tainted by the Children Overboard affair, but clearly he's got bored about living overseas. He's got a farm.
Well, he didn't get bored. His job ended. He was getting a wonderful amount of money for doing nothing.
Well, probably.
Sitting on one of those European banks.
Anyway, he may be back. Just finally...
They're both good friends of mine, so I wish them both well. There's 120 people will vote on Saturday. That is the people who are eligible to go to the Federal Council, and they will determine the outcome between the 2 of them.
And just finally, before we go, there was a fascinating story yesterday in Queensland. 2 kickboxing fathers got their respective 7 and 8-year-old daughters to fight each other in the ring. Dad, we haven't run out of time, but I never thought we'd see 7 and 8-year-old girls in martial arts in full contact competition here in Australia.
Now, next week we're going to talk about Greece, because I believe they've got to get out of the euro and devalue their currency, which will automatically mean they won't need to borrow more money and they won't have to put such strong austerity measures in place, which are causing riots in the country.
Well, the drachma could be back.
Okay, that's it for this week. We'll see you next week.